Okay, today I'm going to show you the tools that I need when I'm fixing a laptop. Now the first thing is just like a soft surface, something that's anti-static. This is a non-slip surface, so you can buy this, it's very cheap, it's like about $2 or $5 for a few meters. And I just cut a section that I use because when I work with the laptop on, it stops it from moving around. It's good to choose a light colour so that if you drop any screws or if any bits break off, you can see against the light background. Now for PCs you need just a standard Phillips head screwdriver. This one, I don't know what size it is, it doesn't really matter, but you need one that's kind of flat because a lot of screws will use this. A basic multimeter. The main purpose of having a multimeter is so you can measure the voltage on, say, a power supply. Next is a brush. Now these are just standard brushes, you can use like a paintbrush if you want to. You want something that doesn't have metal bristles. Laptops are made of fairly weak plastic. You want to use something that's softer than the plastic of the laptop so it doesn't scratch. So I use this for just cleaning dust. They're pretty cheap, it's kind of like $5 or less. You can use a can of compressed air which will spray dust away. If you buy them, they can cost anywhere from $10 up to like $30. It won't last you very long. So I bought this one recently. This is a rechargeable air duster and it can do up to 130,000 RPM, which is really high. You basically press it on the back and you can choose different settings. So you can press, so 3 is the highest setting, 2, I find this is particularly good at cleaning dust when I'm, say, cleaning a video card. A set of screwdrivers with some tools that are like a prying tool, which is these things that look like a guitar pick. Now again, these ones are a thin plastic. They're not very strong, but they're stiff enough that you can use them to separate the casing on a laptop when you're taking the back off. So in the case of one of these sorts of laptops, you would take the screws out first, and then you can use this at an angle and just gently lift it up. Or in some cases you can fit this along the side and you separate it out and just slowly work around. It has little plastic clips that holds the back on. So you just lever this along and you'll slowly pop it off on the back. There's also some tools here. These are also pry tools, but they've got a very thin edge. So you sometimes see these in mobile phone repair kits. They can be used in the same way that you'd use one of these. Their edge is often not very strong, so over time they get all chewed up and you'll have to replace them. But you can get them on eBay or like AliExpress or something like that. So they last maybe a few months and then you just have to replace them. So that the small edge is thin enough that you can fit it in this gap and you can run along the edge. You normally put it so it's facing down so that when you lever it up it separates the casing just enough to pop it up. Some laptop cases will be different. In this case you can see when it looks like this, where the casing has got the keys coming through it. This style, you always open it from the back. So you take the back off first and you access things from the back. But there are some laptops where you'll see there's like a border around here. If it's that style, you'll take some screws out of the back and then it will be enough that you can use a prying tool and you go around the edge of the keyboard and you basically pop that out and there'll be more screws under the keyboard that you take out so that you can release the palm rest, which is this top section. So some brands are different and some models are different, but after you've seen a few of them, you'll get the hang of it. I've just got a magnet which I've added in. It doesn't have to be a super strong magnet, but if you have something that's reasonably strong, it helps with pulling screws out. In some laptops you'll have, say, different sizes of screws for different areas. Sometimes the ones at the front are smaller or shorter than the ones in the main section, and occasionally the middle screw will be a different screw altogether, or it will be like different to all the others, or the ones in the corners are much longer depending on the thickness of the laptop. So for those sorts of cases, I normally have a set of post-it notes that I just put beside me and write like case or top case, left corner, right corner, that sort of thing. And then with those details, I'll know where they came from when I go to reassemble it. I'll also take photos, so like the back is okay, but once I've taken the back off, I'll take a photo just of what it looks like. And then say if I take the battery out, I'll take another photo. And that way when you're reassembling it, sometimes you'll move a wire, say from the Wi-Fi card or some other bit from the hinge, and it matters where it goes. So having a photo of it helps you to figure out if you've put it in the right place. This is just a standard screwdriver. I normally get one that the end swivels, because then when you're doing up screws you can turn it more easily and you can still apply pressure from the top. This bit comes out, which is like an extension if you need to access a space that you can't quite reach. But that doesn't happen very often with computers, unless it's like a really tight case. There's two star bits which are used for Apple computers like MacBooks. You've got standard Phillips head, which is the cross type, and 3 pentalobes, which are, you can think of it like a Allen key, but with 5 sides. It's got 3 flatheads. The other ones are all Torx, which is the 6-pointed type. Torx is like a security bit, so you don't have to get this particular kit, but it's useful to have Phillips head, flathead, and Torx. The pentalobe one you'll only use for Apple products. Now, they do have tweezers. I don't really use these very often because they're pretty weak, and if you squeeze them too hard, they just open at the end. So, okay, you can get better ones if you need them, but that's not something I find very useful. The same with the angled tweezers. These ones, I don't use them that often because when you squeeze the tip, it doesn't grab the very tip as tightly as the angled part. I mean, they are sort of useful. Sometimes there'll be ribbon cables that you need to pull out, but I normally just use 2 fingers and carefully pull it out that way. This one is like a thin metal piece. It's thinner than a screwdriver and it's very stiff. So if I'm trying to open something with a pry tool and it's either not working or it's like breaking the edges, you can use this one, but you just have to be mindful that this type of metal is going to be stronger than the plastic edge on the laptop. So if you do use this, you've got the risk of scratching the laptop. So I only use it in cases where I'm not going to scratch it. As in, if there was a gap here, I could fit it down the gap and carefully wedge it out, and then use a pry tool, or these guitar picks. You can use several of them to kind of wedge in place, and this one only if it's necessary to use more force. Sometimes I'll use it for this edge as well, but I would advise not to use it on the front edge because it's very easy to scratch that bit, and it's noticeable if you scratch it. And then this one, I use it occasionally. It's good because it doesn't conduct electricity, and you can use it to pull out small ribbon cables. It's got a really small nick in it, which is designed for grabbing wires. So things like when you're taking out a Wi-Fi card, they've got really thin wires, and sometimes the angle is it's too tight and you need to pull it out. So having one of these sorts of tools is handy, because you can just kind of slot it under and yank on the cable without affecting stuff around it. So there's a lot of specialty tools in here that I wouldn't use on a regular basis. So these are some better tweezers that are metal. These sorts of screwdrivers tend to be pretty durable, and the tips are often better quality than the ones that you buy from a shop. This tool, called the opening tool, is a very useful tool. I use this if I'm trying to replace a laptop screen. So once you've taken the laptop apart, there's some screws in the hinges and you can take the screws off, and then the screen separates from the base. This opening tool is useful because you can run around the inside edge of the screen and separate the front bezel without damaging the screen. If the screen's already broken, then it's not as much of a stress, but you can just slot this underneath. It's very thin, it's flexible, but it's also stiff. So you can work your way around, unclip it all carefully, be careful around the camera, and then once you go around the whole edge, this can help you to separate it without cracking the bezel. This one is just a bigger pry tool, so if these sorts of smaller ones aren't useful, this one will give you a bit better leverage, and especially if you're taking, say, MacBook's battery out, they're often glued in and they're really annoying to repair. So this can give you enough leverage that you can work around the edge of the battery and separate from the base. The other tools in this kit I haven't used yet. This one is similar to that black pencil with a nick in it. Some of these have just got sort of like hooked points, which, I mean, there are cases where you need it, but it's kind of, if you have a tool that's suitable, then it'll be handy at that time, but it's not something I'd rush out and buy. You can get a kit like this on AliExpress or Amazon, and it's normally about $20 or less. Sometimes these crack at the end, so I'll get them. This one has got the side bits, which is sort of like a pry tool. Sometimes I use that on a screen, but often it's just when I need a little bit more leverage to open a case up. But generally when you take apart a case, you shouldn't have to use too much pressure. So if it feels like it's going to break, then it's better to stop and see if there's any hidden screws. Because on some laptops, the screws aren't obvious, and they'll hide them under, say, these feet, or there'll be like a strip across the bottom and they'll put the screws under that strip. So it's good to have a range of different tools so that you can carefully open things and reuse them again. This one is some batteries that you use for the CMOS battery, which is, a CMOS is like a chip that's on the motherboard that holds all the settings for the laptop or the PC. They usually use the same type of battery, but some laptops will use a different style of battery. So it can be specific to the machine that you're working on. If it's a PC, then this type, a CR2032, that's the size they always use. These will last for about 5 years usually. Sometimes they last up to 10 years. Sometimes if a computer's misbehaving, or say it loses the time, or certain settings keep resetting, I would take this battery out, use a multimeter, and test if it's 3 volts or higher. If it's under 3 volts, like say if it's 2.97, some motherboards that's fine, but if it's like 2.8 or something, I would just change it, because it can cause really weird headaches that you wouldn't expect. And sometimes when things are crashing, it's just as simple as replacing this battery so that the settings don't change. So you can buy these in bulk on Amazon, or you can buy them at the supermarket if you just need one or two. So I hope that gave you a good enough range of what sorts of things you might need. There are obviously other accessories that I use as well, but this is a good starting point.